I can't make the picture good on this, and that's not meant as an insult to me. I mean the technology, but the laptop, the picture works fine, and the volume often works fine, but sometimes the volume doesn't work at all. So I do a whole video, then I play it back, and there's nothing there, and I feel like I'm wasting my time. It's so annoying that. It's annoying that I made an hour 10-minute one. It didn't work. So that is why I'm thinking, okay, this picture's bad. Just think of it like radio, because I'm not a techie. If the tech doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm not one of those who can go fiddle on for 20 minutes and everything comes back to normal and it's all fine. It's just me. I mean, like, some people probably can do that. Lucky them. Anyway, this video is my politics is cooperation based, and it's also class based. But I'm adding the cooperation to the usual class stuff I go on about. This is the video I made earlier on my laptop, 1 hour 10 minutes, then didn't play. So I'm doing it again, and I already had some notes, so a lot of it was spontaneous. And anyway, no point complaining, because when I watch this in 10 years, I'll forward this bit. So I understand the difference between propaganda and what is a class interest. That's the substance. That's the starting point, really, of what I'm going to go on about. It's the first principle. It's always about propaganda, interests, and stuff like that. It rightly implies that some people are propagandized and they're told what to think. They're told what to think because the propaganda wants to cause a split among the working class. It wants to split them so that it can benefit at times. That's sometimes like a Tory thing. Can be a Labour thing as well these days. And that propaganda divide and rule is crystal clear to see. It's absolutely crystal clear to see. You see it in the right-wing press all the time. Split the working class vote to pretend that this is all about free speech. So look, you've got free speech here, and it's against the working class. It's against them. It's not for them, and it's not liberal either. So it's not just that it's against the working class's class interests economically, but it's sort of like also against some people who are maybe, I don't know, gay or lesbian or black among the working class or more middle class, and it causes splits. And you see that this benefits the state superstructure. It benefits those who are wanting to do this, because there's no point from their perspective in having a united working class, because if they've got a united working class, then they get the result they don't want. So this is why they do that sort of thing. It's not a myth. It's gone on forever. It's common sense. Obviously, they don't spell it out. They don't say we're going to try and split the working class so we benefit. Because they're immoral. They're not stupid. You know, I always say that when people make arguments about the state superstructure and all that being stupid, I always defend them. I say there's no way you can have a system, a science, a propaganda, and call it stupid. It's immoral, not stupid. It works. If it was stupid, it wouldn't work. And you occasionally get confessions of this. By coincidence, this is a big coincidence, just yesterday, by coincidence, double coincidence, because I just said they don't just blurt it out because they're not stupid. What the Times game here was, I'm not quite sure, but they put on their front page headline, Sunak's going to play divide and rule in order to try and get back some support. Now, I'm thinking here that the Times maybe isn't quite so pro-Tory as the more obvious right-wing press, like Telegraph and the Mail stuff. And maybe it was a bit of a swipe. I didn't read the article. I think it was behind the paywall anyway. And by saying that, though, it was probably I guess, an interpretation of stuff Sunak said, because I stick to what I said a minute ago. No one ever just blurts this out. We're going to play divide and rule politics and try and win votes. But the Times was saying that's what he's doing. You can tell by the headline, the first bit of it that I read. And in the headline it said Sunak to play divide and rule. And there's no way that Sunak would have said exactly them words. So I'm thinking it was interpreted what Sunak said by the Times. And it is rare, it's a one-off. Not normally does it come out like that. On the other hand, maybe it's the Times isn't so keen on the government. Now, I think there's more people than ever before see through propaganda, divide and rule. And the ones who don't are obviously the ones who are propagandized. That's like an irony because they'll never know it. And it's corrupt. It harms everyday social relationships, and that's the main problem with it, really. That's what's so corrupt, that harming of social relationships very needlessly. Now, on these notes earlier on, I challenged myself. I said, these class-based politics, does that alienate the middle class? And I put, no, you should remember, say you're a working class person, you remember your roots. So you're aiming to become a middle class professional, probably. Say you got to university, you want to become a middle class professional. You might be so bothered about your roots that you'll still define yourself as working class. But it's fair for someone who's looking at you to think, nah, I think you're middle class. That's fair enough. And I would probably normally agree with the person who's giving you a different definition. But I mean, it doesn't really matter. If you strive to get middle income, let's put it that way, you've achieved it, you're sticking to your roots. Now, by not rejecting them roots, and I'll explain what I mean by not rejecting the roots. Now, first of all, I'm not anti-middle class. Merit is something that's very middle class. And merit, for me, is sacrosanct. It's comparable to equality. Them two things, the balance of the two. You know, for example, in most social democracies in Western Europe, they don't say, oh, do we want merit or do we want equality? What they do is they have relative merit, but they redistribute a lot. But you're still obviously better off if you're a brain surgeon than if you're on a menial job. So for example, in Scandinavia, a lot of it's percentage of average income. So I don't know, for example, you might have had a middle class job, and you're unemployed, and you get a certain percentage of what you were getting when you had that middle class income. I imagine there's a ceiling, but they're very generous. They don't just cut it off straight. So on like public sector pay in Scandinavia, they often have it as a percentage of national average. And they're critical of us because in Britain they say they're always having these conflicts over how much pay is going to be increased by, and benefits are too low, and all this sort of stuff. They think they've got all these problems sorted in the 1960s over there. And they have to have tremendous consistency. It's a bit like the way we criticise America for not having universal healthcare. Sweden criticises us on a lot of things. Obviously not that one, but a lot of other things to do with incomes, to do with inequality, and so on. And yet there's a lot of merit in Sweden. The system isn't just saying everyone's got the same amount of money. So they're balancing equality and merit. That's a good idea. Philosophically, I agree with them 100%. Now, getting back to the question about am I alienating the middle class? The answer is certainly not. Merit, we strive to be middle income. And let's imagine someone who's working class gets a student grant for uni. We don't have grants anymore, so we're imagining they exist here. The class interest is still rock solid when that person becomes middle class or middle income. He only becomes a class traitor if he then rejected the policies that benefited him and enables him to become a middle class professional. So, for example, he takes a student grant, and then he hears a right wing government saying, let's stop working class people going to university so much. We want less people going to uni. How could we do that? Oh, we could end the grant system with something more difficult for people to get along with. I mean, this did happen in the past. So, and then imagine that ex-working class person says, yeah, I support that now because I'm middle class. That's when he's a class traitor. It's not illegal, but I think it's hypocritical and immoral of him, this hypothetical person. Because it's like he climbs the ladder that he's been provided with, and then he kicks the ladder down from the next people to go on it. That's how it comes across to me anyway. So I think it's a logical thing, a common sense thing. But then again, this does happen. All I'm claiming is that it's immoral. It's the sort of thing that person does openly there. If he did that, say, he might be open about his new way of thinking. Whereas the right-wing print press in the UK are all very sly about it, sort of thing. You know what I mean? It's sort of like they wouldn't spell it out, but they would support it anyway. And they would know what they're doing. Yeah, I'm just looking at the notes I made for the next bit. Yeah, you might say back to me, oh, well, you could call it middle class politics, but I don't call it middle class because they're already comfortable. So, for example, I'm trying to make the working class better off and support class interests. Whereas if it's middle class, then I don't think, oh, we need to desperately get money to the middle class so that they can become rich. You know what I mean? It's not the same. It's not as important. So the emphasis is never getting money so much to the middle class, more getting money to the working class. I'm not saying that there can never be income tax cut for the middle class, but it's not anything that I would ever do radically. It's always going to be trivial. Whereas the substance is what I would do with the working class. Middle class politics would become more important if, and only if for me, the techies are right on their most extreme view of AI revolution and the UBI necessity. For example, if it was correct that the middle class profession is going to be wiped out and not going to be middle class anymore, but then you'll be working class. So you see what I mean? Now, the next question or challenge I put to myself was where I said, this class position is also liberal, isn't it? It's an important point, and it's a fair challenge to myself because it is broadly liberal, yes. Now, I always say the following because in the UK we've got a Liberal Democrat Party. I'm saying broadly liberal because you get broadly liberal people are in all. There's broadly liberal people who have no interest in politics. There's broadly liberal people in the Conservative Party, and there's broadly liberal people in the Labour Party. So the liberalism strand is sort of like, I mean, that's partly why the Liberals, partly why the Liberal Democrats are successful, because their liberalism is already so much in British society. So they don't feel like a need to be. It's not like we're. I think there's many faults with Britain, but it's not like we're bottom of the league for liberalism. Where you need to bring liberalism in, and there's a craving for it because people take it for granted to some extent because it's all within the culture. Of course, though, there is people who are not liberal at all. Farage, for instance. Now, so our politics is broadly liberal as well as class-based, and also this liberalism is consistent with middle-class values because they're not as affected by the divide and rule. So the people in the working class or in poverty who are propagandized by the anti-migrant or anti-gay sort of anti-Jewish sort of sentiment is more likely to be taken up by the working class rather than the middle class, because people who are closer at the bottom of the pile are feeling worse in their everyday life, so they naturally aim for a scapegoat, and they're more able to be manipulated for that reason. And although the propaganda is coming from the elites, who are a million trillion miles away from these people at the bottom. You know, the elites, for example, in right-wing tabloid newspapers in London, that are billionaire funded, even though it's coming from the exact opposite world, it's sort of like aimed to hit the people at the bottom, and for them to take up this scapegoating and to take up these prejudices. Whereas the educated middle class tend to be more comfortable and like are not likely to think, I hate them as well. I'm prejudiced towards them. Natural gays and all that. It's always more when there was more success about getting people to be anti-gay, it was the working class that were more likely to take up that prejudice rather than the middle class. And it's the same on anything, anti-Semitism, racism. So it's the same. It's the same on any minority attack. Now, with the exception of one, the poor. The poor are probably more likely to experience prejudice from the liberal middle class, because otherwise the poor would be being prejudiced towards themselves. So that's the one that doesn't quite fit, naturally enough. So there is a far right that isn't part of my cooperation politics. Remember, this video is titled about cooperation. Now I know it's also about class, but it's the far right isn't part of the cooperation. Now think about this. So the reason why it's not is because if I reach out to liberal conservatives or to the liberal left, starting off from my class-based social democratic position, the liberal left and the liberal right will grab my hand and say, let's think about this. We'll have a discussion. But the far right won't. They'll chop my hand off instead of effort. You know what I mean? Because they don't want cooperation with the sort of politics I'm going on about. They don't want people to reach out, because their whole way of getting power for the far right is by attacking the sort of minorities I'm talking about, and attacking liberalism. And the far right's not quite so consistent on economics anymore, but some far right ideologies would also attack my focus on even helping the poor, whereas other far right don't. 1930s far right stuff wasn't aimed at the poor, as long as they were white and straight and everything. But the far right don't want to come together with what I would describe as the modern world. So it's not that I don't want all people to be united. I do, but it's just they refuse. They refuse because their politics is based on hate. To put it bluntly, I've called a spade a spade. I've got to put it like that. And why shouldn't I put it like that? Why should I try to be extra nice and polite and respectful to the far right? So when I say that politics is based on hate, I'm not doing that emotionally. I'm not saying that emotionally. I'm not saying it to get at them. It's just that that's what they seem to want to be perceived like. So I can't hold my arm out and say, "Come on, join us," when they're going to just give me the finger back. So it's just unfortunate that the far right Now, the far right can be thought of as those who are making these prejudice policies, or you can think about them as the people at the bottom who are the victims of that. So the people at the bottom who are victims of that, they're propagandized. Now, there isn't a truly fledged out far right political party that's unified in Britain so much. I mean, you could talk about Farage's efforts, but they're very small. But they do exist because obviously my view is that if someone like Farage had much more support around him, like Tories defecting to his party or whatever, and getting a really professional, even if immoral, far right party, my view is that, and Farage I think admits this, and this studies show it, they can only get about 6% of the middle class, and that's what makes them max out at about 30% potential in the polls. Now, they're a trillion miles away from that now because he's lost a lot of support. And this 30%, a lot of them are propagandized. I'm sure of it. They're at the bottom. They've got exploited by the capitalist system that gives them nothing. And they're miserable, and they're just easy to propagandize. Now, when such a party that someone like Farage has, when it gets to something like 30%, I don't just blame Farage, and I'm obviously saying that a lot of them voters are victims, they're propagandized by the top and also by right-wing press that would be supporting this. They're not just victims of them, the victims of the state superstructure that already has in place, even if it's liberal, this, and it is liberal, this capitalist system where some people have bucket loads of cash and other people have nothing. So they're the original enablers, that original liberal capitalist system. It enables Farage types, Farage successful, literally like a Farage, someone who's successful, to exploit that capitalist system's failures, and to exploit it in a negative way, of then exploiting the poor people at the bottom, and creating division in society. Now, it's not as, of course I can blame Farage to a large extent, but nowhere near to a full extent, because the capitalist system is originally to blame, and that can be full of Paddy Ashdown types. You know what I mean? Nice guy, but liberal, but still he's presiding over a capitalist system. And Democrats in America, they're very similar to liberal Democrats in the UK. That enables people like Trump. It's really pretty fresh, that, for Democrats. So we have to be careful talking like that in the States. But when we get a bit of distance from this, we'll be able to see it much more easily. In the 30s, the capitalist system enabled a Mosley, for instance, in Britain. I'm saying that now because I thought, well, what gives some distance? I'm thinking nearly 100 years ago, give some distance. Now, fascism was culturally strong in the 30s, but that was because of the capitalist systems crashing across the world. And it shows that while they probably perceived themselves to be more liberal than fascist, these capitalist systems, I'm pretty sure that's a safe bet. They perceive themselves as liberal more than fascist, yeah. But nevertheless, they enabled fascism. So we all rightly say, oh, Hitler was evil, and Himmler was evil, and Goering was evil, but they were enabled by capitalism, by liberal democracy. And they were enabled so much that they were able to crash liberal democracy. It's an extreme example, but if we come to the current time, capitalism enables Farage on the right-wing press can cause give a lot of propaganda. People at the bottom split, working class split. Now, what's the difference between propaganda and class interests? Class interests is when it benefits working class, when it benefits you. So it's in your interests if you're gay or lesbian to support to welcome Pride. So you don't when you're gay and you see something from Pride, you don't say, "Oh, what a propaganda." No, you either ignore it because you're happy enough as you are as gay, or you think, "Hey, yeah, that's good," but it's certainly not going to harm you. Not going to harm. It's not a poison. It's certainly on your side. This is just obvious. It's just obvious, and it's similarly when socialists got working class access to university education. That's not propaganda. That's on your side. You might not want to go to uni, but it's not against you. It's giving you the opportunity to better yourself. So that's on your side. That's not propaganda. So you can either ignore it or you'll support it. But to dislike it would be really strange. It'd be like someone who hasn't got an allergy to chocolate, who likes chocolate. You offer the chocolate bar and you think, "No, I don't want it." I smash you in the face. Nothing against you. Just you might want that sweet food, sort of thing. And when it's propaganda, that's when it's not for the class interest. That's when you see that it's trying to split the class. That's how all throughout history, Marxists, socialists, social democrats, we all notice that. We all understand it. It happens more in some countries than others. It's not so common. Historically, in a nation like Norway, Anders Breivik happened. That was a shock. Now it's happened a lot under Trump, obviously, and it's happened in recent years here. And this moves us on. This moves us on now because although I've blamed capitalism for the original, I can ignore it for a minute. I have to always come back to that. I can ignore it for a minute to see who within the mainstream political world is on my side on the rest of it. For example, on if you ignore the capitalist enabling of the likes of Farage and then the prejudices and then the people at the bottom, some of whom take this prejudice up because they're feeling miserable and they want a scapegoat. Well, people on my side, and not just people who are working class social democrats or working class socialists, there's also liberal conservatives and liberal left. They're all on my side in terms of typical prejudices towards Jewish people, black people, Muslim people, gays and lesbians. They're the examples I always give. And for a minute, we have to ignore the class prejudice towards the poor because we're first of all trying to get some sort of potential support. You know, when I say you can reach out, I don't mean to say anything's perfect. And so if I reach out to the far right, they slap my hand away. If I reach out to these where everything's not perfect, the liberal left and the centre right, they'll grab the hand and they say, "Let's talk." So we're not going to talk here to them hypothetically about the poor, but we can talk to them about the prejudices towards the usual suspects these days who get picked on, so to speak, and would make progress straight away because that's not really a problem. But it's still worth pointing out to explain the picture. I'm just looking at my notes again because I haven't looked for a while. So remember always that it's profitable for right-wing tabloids to play divide and rule politics forever and to cash in. So it helps them stay pretty in wealthy positions, backed by billionaire owners. Most obvious one of them is Rupert Murdoch. Goodness me, he's been disliked for like ever. He's in his 90s now. It feels like it's about 140. Yeah, and they give this impression of free speech. Yeah, really. What they're doing is propagandizing the poor so that they say what they are told to think. It's anything but free speech. And it comes from a megaphone at the top, backed up, like I just said, by billionaire owners. And they just basically blast them all this poison out. And obviously, some people go for it and others don't. And the lower down you go, the more people are going to take it up, and that divides the working class. And can I just say that a point here, like, one of the things, problems is that the people at the bottom who take it up, if you studied those people, you'd find overwhelming lack of education there. So they can't stand up to this. And that's why they fall for it every time. And there's not really anything, you can't go out to those people and like just say to them, look, it's because you're uneducated, because it sounds cheeky. Yeah, ironically, the people that are being cheeky to them, are more than cheeky, are the ones who use them like chess pieces on a board for their whole lives. It's disgusting, really. It's well documented, it's well understood. But the problem is it's well understood by people who don't fall for it. And that's why you think if it's so well understood, no, they won't fall for it. But it's not well understood by everyone. It's not well understood by those who aren't educated. It's common sense to people who have studied politics or something. It's well documented. So all the people, so the middle class don't fall for it, obviously. But they know this goes on. I mean, some people in the middle class just won't fall for it because it just doesn't vibe with them. But a lot of them actually understand this situation rather than just have a feeling of disliking that. You know, most people have a feeling of disliking that or understand it. Not everyone, never everyone, it's never everyone. But more people in the middle class will understand. More people who've been at uni will understand. So the propaganda is actually deliberately aimed at those who don't understand. So then those people who don't understand consume deliberately this material, and they're effectively being told what to think. And they're being told what to think not just for a random reason, they're being told what to think for the benefit of those who are telling them what to think, to maintain power. And just yesterday, like I said, the Times front page headline, very rare that this is openly said Sunak aiming for divide and rule to try and get back some support. Now, when the Times, they'll all be educated at the Times, right? They'll all be educated, so they'll understand what they were saying. You see what I mean? They'll understand that is not aimed at the middle class educated. They'll understand that it's aimed at the poor. So by coincidence, it's a lucky coincidence, I have an example. It's the 23rd of July today, 2023. So yeah, if you went to the Times newspaper on the 22nd of July, 2023, the front page headline is talking about my politics in effect, or a big chunk of it anyway, and applying it to the current government. As I said, I didn't read much of the headline and a bit at the start. That's what it was going on about, yeah. Just didn't bother delving into detail. I was glad to have paid anyway to go further. So yeah, so you can see that I would dislike the right-wing national press in Britain. I think it's got a reputation for being the worst in the world. Worst in the modern world, at least. Now, I hope they go the same way that the News of the World went. The News of the World's corruption. I think that had to do with phone hacking, wasn't it? For me, there would be an inquiry into historical corruption from the right-wing press. Some of the corruption could be very simple to understand, some more along the lines of my politics and what the Times was discussing yesterday. And I think one day, because we're getting a more educated society, one day it'll be well understood. And I think one day they will be looking at these papers, and there's some sort of justice will come along. I mean, I just mentioned hoping it goes the way of the News of the World. So let's say it doesn't. I still think that eventually, even if there's no inquiry, the way the human mind's going will eventually see through them, and it'll be well understood what they were like. It won't be of great interest to people. It'll be more like probably when I watch documentaries that are detailed on Jack the Ripper from the late 1880s in London, and it goes into the press there. It's well understood because we've moved on. You can understand everyone watching these programs understands perfectly well how stupid it sounds from our perspective, the way the UK's press went on in the 1880s. As it was saying, well, Jack the Ripper can't possibly have been English because Englishmen don't do this sort of thing. You know, it just makes us like embarrassed to hear it. But that's what people who do these shows, they've got an old paper in front of them and they're actually reading it saying that. And then they say, then they go to another newspaper, national newspaper from the UK at the time, and they're reading from it. And it says, it sounds like the sort of thing that perhaps a Jew would do. You know, that sort of thing is just, you know, and I'm saying that our press now, it wasn't a time when suddenly penny dropped in people's heads and people thought all of a sudden thought how absurd what those newspapers were saying in the late 1880s in the Victorian era. It's just an evolution to when we all eventually do get it. It's not like a particular date where some powerful people sit around the table and they say, well, you know, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, and I'm just saying that eventually we will all see, not just some of us, lots of us, but not just, a lot of people now have a vague view that the right-wing press are just scum, but you know, will actually be so bloody obvious to everyone in the same way that the Victorian press is so bloody, late Victorian era press is so bloody obvious to all of us. I imagine there was no press in the early Victorian era because it was like a new technology, the print press, I suppose. But by the Jack the Ripper era, it was really going strong. And of course, I imagine, I have to check my facts on this, but I imagine they might have thought that maybe he's a poor person who was English. Some of the press, I guess, would think maybe he's a poor English person could have done it. So like, it's hard to say because on the one hand, that seems like a possible prejudice you could imagine in the Victorian era because they're illiterate, so they can't even read them being accused of it. So, on the other hand, the person who did the murders is sometimes said to have had good surgery skills. We'll get into that. So anyway, there we go. I think I was going on a few minutes back about how I want the press to go bust, and you can see why. I want to go out of business, want to get justice. So yes, cooperation would be between the working class interests, the liberal centre-left, and liberal centre-right. I think the substance, though, starts with the class interest politics. The working class politics understands propaganda when it sees it. And I think the others, the liberal left and the liberal right, sort of see it because they're educated, but the working class thing is focused on that. So we definitely see it. And we're not tempted by joining in. With, like, as the liberal centre left and liberal centre right might be tempted. And, you know, they might, I think there's a bit more image and vibe and branding with the liberals, whether they're Lib Dems or whether they're liberal left or liberal centre right. There's a book coming out by I'm going to try and get that on screen for myself. I don't think you can see it. It's David Gork, one of the liberal conservatives, tweeted about it. It's coming out in September, but it's got some well-known political types writing in it, and therefore it will sell somewhere along with as the political geeks will buy it. Yeah, it's got a write-up by John Major, and Michael Heseltine's got a chapter in it, so you can see that it's not going to just sell none. Not going to be one of those types of books. It's called The Case for the Centre Right, but it's very much, and it's confessed by the book, it's no lie and they're not deceiving anyone, very much the liberal centre right. Now look, you can tell by the people contributing in the book, I'm reading it, I've got the image in front of me, don't think you can see it, but I can. It's edited by David Gork. John Major writes at the start of it, like a preface, and he slags off the last 6 or 7 years, the Johnson, Farage, Trumpy era, hates it. Rory Stewart's in it. I think he's probably voting Lib Dem. Michael Heseltine's in it. He did actually speak at a Lib Dem podium. Dominic Grieve. Sam Gimar's in it. He actually defected from the Conservatives to the Liberal Democrats. I think he's a David Cameron Conservative, so he obviously didn't mind. He obviously thought that the Liberal Conservatives' best party was the Liberal Democrats. I think he thinks that still now. Interestingly, Ken Clarke isn't in there. That could be either because he doesn't like the word right, or he is old, so he might just be might be ill or something. But people he likes are definitely there. Obviously, most obviously Michael Heseltine, and he'll like David Gork himself, and he'll fine with John Major. Yeah, so that liberal centre right is a good example. That book coming out, it's worth mentioning because that's the sort of thing I'm meaning on the liberal centre right. I think the liberal left, there's a heck of a lot of overlap with that liberal centre right. So you really don't have much difference between the two at all. I mean, like I was just saying there, some of them liberal centre right people are voting Lib Dem. Michael Heseltine used to call himself a national liberal, which I interpret as the sort of stuff I'm going on about the liberal left, liberal right, but wanting it to be like a national party. The Dems these days can challenge to win seats in the southwest, and that's about it. The liberal left and the liberal centre have so little between them that I think they can just work together. I think if we just had a liberal centre left party and a liberal centre right party in the UK, so there'd be an inch apart, and if the Liberal left were like here, then the Liberal right would deliberately just put an inch between them and be on the right, just to give this bit of choice. And it works vice versa. Both would play the same game because they don't. Hopefully, they'd be able to admit that they're the same, rather than pretending to be radically different. That would be just typical. Yeah, so I think the substance is with a class interest, and the Liberal left and the Liberal right do too much. They get too much into image and branding, etc., strategies, and so forth. And I think that is because they are part of the state superstructure, which is a problem. Because the state superstructure is something that I obviously think underlies the splits, the division, the conflicts, the far right stuff. Because the state superstructure's got such a vast division to begin with. The divisiveness from the lack of difference in how much money people have in society makes it easy to create division on other matters. If you took a person who was maybe going to go into more hate because they were miserable and poor and stuff, and you gave them a bucket of cash, and you just give them a little bit of mentoring, they'd be fine, probably, in most cases. In most cases, can't say every case, can't ever say everyone. I always said not much in life is 100%, but in most cases, that person would be fine. Now, they might turn into a hypocrite, like I was saying at the start, where if a person goes up the ladder, they're meant to remember the roots, but they might not. Now, so you give someone a bit of mentoring and a bucket of cash, you might turn into a hypocrite, you might become selfish, but you're not going to go into hateful, anti-this, anti-that. You're not going to be easy to exploit anymore because they feel more confident with himself to decide what the hell he wants to do now. But that sort of thing, I think it's an important point. Of course, you don't want to give people buckets of cash because it does create that thing I was saying there, where they might become a class traitor and they might be divisive and they've just caused they might not become that hateful person now, but encourage others to become hateful. The problem goes on and on and on. Now, my view is people get more educated, and the problem for the state becomes that we become ungovernable. It's not the more dumb we become, the more ungovernable we become. It's the more intelligent we become, the more ungovernable we become. Because the educated aren't so easy to exploit, manipulate, to when we're not deferent, we don't think that's how progress works. We think that equality, being honest, being decent, being civilized, merit, these things all are what counts. And reaching out, being self-critical. So if we're self-critical, if we're reaching out, we don't expect the bloody government to act like manipulative and stuff, to gaslight and to divide and rule. So we become harder to govern. Hopefully we become impossible to govern. Now, my thinking is that we don't have any. Well, with the way politics has gone, it's the poor and the least well-educated that are voting Tory, but not in any great numbers because that red wall's crashed and burned around them, and now the Tories are getting beat in every demographic you can find. nevertheless, we, the sort of politics I'm discussing can't really challenge the Tories to put pressure on them to give policies that we want, to put them in place, because they've got other demographics that they're trying to get hold of. According to the Times, they're trying to get hold of demographics that are the opposite of people like me. People who want to do divide and rule. But when Starmer gets in power, our chance to fight a government now comes to the fore. Our chance to really fight a government and to really win from it. Now, Starmer, I think, is going to try and govern like a bloody Thatcherite. But with the Tories destroyed and out of power, they'll rip themselves apart. There's this book I was mentioning a few minutes ago. It's not got people who are just going to sit on their ass and do nothing forever. They're just waiting for the Tories to lose, and then they're going to try and take their party back. That's the meaning of that book. They probably say that in that book. I don't know, it hasn't come out yet, but I mean, it's pretty obvious that that's what they think. I mean, John Major, we've been told in the preface, Major writes, we've got to defeat this populism that's got our party and got the country. So Major's forward, or his preface to the book, is basically come on, we're going to take you lot on, the Tories as they are. And from their point of view, the people writing this book, their goal is to defeat what the Tories have become and to get their party back. That's what that book's about. That's what that book's very much about. So the Tories are going to rip themselves apart, because the Tories that have got power in the last 6 or 7 years aren't just going to roll over and say, okay, yeah, I'll be back. What they're going to do is they're going to say, come on then, we'll take you on. So they're going to, I don't know who will win that battle. It's difficult to say, but there'll be a genuine civil war in that party. Now, while they're having a civil war, I think that we can take on Starmer and we can have our civil war. We aren't interested in kicking the Tories about, because that's their job to do that. Our job is to take on our side, because I'm not saying that the Starmer is my side. Not, it's definitely not. But I'm thinking that the demographics that will challenge Labour are the demographics that are Labour. You know what I mean? That are genuinely progressive, that I genuinely think along the class politics I do, and therefore, when Starmer takes a punch from them, that punch equates to loss of votes, and Starmer then has to say, do I keep taking these punches, these loss of votes, or do I give them what they want? That's going to be a really dilemma for him, because he's going to bloody go into power thinking he's going to govern like a Thatcherite, and our job's to stop him doing that. See, the super rich, they blackmail political parties. They blackmail them, literally. They say, here's £25 million, and don't forget the tax cut, sort of attitude. Whereas that's another example of principle of equal voice being totally non-existent. Because you can't be like some poor pensioner and go to the government and say, here's £25 million, don't forget I put my pension up. See what I mean? So what you have is our democracy is bought. It's bought by people who are spivs, blackmailing capitalists, and it's corrupt. It's just another example of corruption. You get that in America. You hear a lot of complaints about it. Corporate governance and all that stuff. Yeah, so let's say we punched Starmer enough in government, and I'm not. If you said to me now, is that your goal? Your politics ends up just being a fight between you and a Labour government. I said, no, it's not really. See, the problem is the reform and democratisation and decentralisation that government should do, they don't do. But if we start punching them hard enough, the penny will drop, and then they will do what needs to be done properly. The goal of my politics is not that. That's their fault that ends up happening. You know, if you keep people down for too long, and I think that the last government I liked was 1945, then you're going to eventually punch them. You're eventually going to punch them, fight back. You're not just going to take it forever and say, what wonderful democracy. Remember, we got all that in 1945. You know, it's not like, you know, you give them something in 1945, then you give them sod all else for the next 80 years. So, like, eventually we are going to fight back. So it's their fault that that fight back happens. It's not our fault. If you poison someone and that person realizes you poison them and then he acts like a twat to you, it's not their fault that they're acting like a twat to you. It's your fault for harming them. So it's like that. But it's not the goal, no, because I still don't want that to be the final goal, as if there's no other option. I want them. Our fight to them is meant to then lead to them democratising the UK, decentralising. Now, what does this mean? It means that eventually 10 Downing Street and Parliament and this right-wing news media just goes. Or the right-wing news media goes. Downing Street and Parliament will still exist, but be weak and irrelevant. Nothing wrong with that being weak and irrelevant. I'm not talking Guy Fawkes stuff. We don't need to knock Parliament down. It can stay as a tourist attraction. It can be very nice. It can be good for documentaries and historical programs, and American tourists and Chinese tourists and Japanese tourists can go there. All that's fine, but it's going to be weakened in what it can deliver and substance of it, because it must be severely weakened, not just tinkered with, severely weakened. And then what you have is, what the final goal is, rather than the propaganda we have now and divide and rule crap, people will not be able to say, well, we'll not be at a point like this and say, there's power. They won't be able to do that. That's a good thing. Once you get rid of that power, elite stuff at the top, once you got rid of that, then there's no propaganda, there's no divisiveness. So it's so much watered down that it's watered down with rushing water. It's not just the drops. You know, it really is massively watered down. I feel like being a boiling hot summer's day and you're sweating and your face is going red and you feel like you're going to pass out. Feel like a good flush of lovely freezing cold water all over you. That's how much watering it down. A lot healthier. So that power is so thinly spread that you cannot see it and say, there it is. At the moment you can bloody say there it is. You point to news media institutions, which you see all the time, billionaire owned, that cause so much of the grief. Then you point, like I said, to Parliament and Downing Street. So you can say where it's now, and it's regionalised, a little tiny little bit of the region of the UK in Westminster, SW1, even though the bloody postcode. Yeah, so that is the end goal. So the punching stuff is to get them to do that, but I mean it a lot, trillion times more, right, than something like Spain, Catalonia, because they can still point to where the power was. Say Catalonia won, you would say, there's the power, and you point to Catalonia. And now I want to be able to go beyond all that. Beyond all, it's too thinly spread to be able to say that. And by the way, if Catalonia is defeated, You say, there's the power, and you point to Madrid. So a trillion times more than that. I only brought that up to emphasize I am not meaning devolution. It's more than that, much more than that. So power would be spread super thinly throughout society so that it was impossible to point and say, there's the power. With no propaganda gaslighting, the public far-right sentiment would die a death overnight. So there's the problem of we start with the class-based politics, because the propaganda and the divide and rule that's where the substance is. Although I reach out to the liberal centre right and liberal centre left, I don't trust them too much. So start off with the substance of the class politics, because that is solid for like a century or more. And whereas these liberal types tend to be strategizing for themselves, and they also maintain the state superstructure, which is a problem. So therefore, these liberal centre right and liberal centre left, we have to convince them that although they can say, and they're correct to say, that the last 6 or 7 years have been a nightmare, that it still was brought, that nightmare came about because of them. Because of them. That's why it came about. They enabled it. The state superstructure enables it, because the state superstructure is such a divisive thing within itself, and the capitalist system is so divisive. And for the market distributes goods excellently across society. But the inequality of capitalism brings about the very things that they hate so much. So we've got to show them that it's no good just going back to pre-2016 and just tinkering by and being a little bit more generous towards the poor. There has to be a lot of radicalism in this. There has to be I think we need a left, take social democracy in Scandinavia. We need to be at least as left wing as there. We have the market, but we redistribute so much of the wealth and income, not from the middle class as such, but from the capitalist class, the top. And we work with the liberal centre left and centre right on by putting universal basic income on the table, not by telling them what to do. Difference. We have to work with them, and we need to probably restructure the NHS the way they get paid, maybe by thinking about as an average of the nation's incomes, because otherwise it just gets silly every year. And we need to get rid of the right-wing print press, and eventually we need to show that the system's broken so much because people in modern nations do not think that those over there should have all that power when they use it so much for their own self-interest and not our interest. So it has to be thinly spread. We've got a lot of work to do, but I mean that's because we're studying so shite. So that's the end of the video. You get the picture. We start with the class-based politics because it's where the substance is, and from there we can work with the ones we don't trust so much, the liberal left and the liberal centre right. We cannot work with the far right because the far right are partly responsible for the divisiveness, and they're also partly victims from the existing capitalist state superstructure that creates all that. Whew. I'm not really bothered that the picture's bad, as long as this played. That's the end of the video.